Well, afternoon, people.
Afternoon.
Hope everyone is good. You know, these are just images that I took whilst conducting the research. Actually, it was taken by participants. I had a bunch of participants, and this was what was basically happening. It was in 2016, 2017 when I was doing the research as part of my PhD. So, the question, do we have any Radiohead fans or people who know Radiohead? Oh yeah, have you seen the video to Daydreaming? And Tom York is basically just walking, opening doors all day. That's actually quite, that's my argument for how life is actually. We just walk and open doors, and which was basically why I did this research in the manner that I did it. It was basically a focus on walking as a way in which you experience life. And that's how I did it. Was as simple as that. Just focusing on the mundane and then analyzing it and thinking about it more theoretically and trying to gain a couple of things from looking at it. So the title of the presentation has been changed, I think. So now it's just basically how female students experience safety concerns and realities during habitual walking at a South African university. This will be the outline of the presentation. Firstly, the background and the rationale why I basically did the research, the scope where I'm focusing, looking at theoretical framework to basically be who I use, the authors and their theories. The methods and procedures will take quite a bit, as I did a lot with the participants. Now the findings, I have like basically 3 findings, and I'll talk about those, and then just the conclusion. The background and rationale is my research is focused on basically safety, but safety which is related to criminal encounter, because I've seen that there's safety which talks about a space, maybe a classroom being a safe space for you to talk. So I'm basically not focusing on that sort of safety. I'm focusing on the criminal encounter safety. And there is a vast collection of literature which is basically from outside South Africa. And in this literature, we focus on victimization, basically a transit of being victimized. The fear, obviously, having a criminal encounter will have some form of fear that it will encourage in the person. And then basically how criminal encounter would constrain your behavior. I think it's basically an argument that once you have experienced it, or fear that you might experience a criminal encounter, you tend to, walk to different places. You don't walk to other places so often. Well, there's a vast literature, like I said, internationally. But then when you look at South Africa, it is quite few people who focus on safety in terms of just being criminally apprehended or criminally encountered. And this literature basically focuses on safety in particular spaces, like safety in a residence hall, you can call it, a dining hall, I think we also call it that. And then the safety which focuses on, but probably I can term qualities of safety compromises, and then the safety which focuses on basically gender-based violence is the main safety quality that we focus on, and the other sort of are you mugged sort of things. So it's a specific sort of focus on safety, and I'm arguing that basically this is not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is, as someone is walking a place, at the moment that they start to think about their safety, what happens, how do they construct it, how do they think about it, how does it come about that you actually basically end up being someone who's thinking about safety, and it's affecting your experience of being in a particular place. And I'm not focusing on a particular place, which is quite weird, because I am focusing on a university, but then in the university, I'm not isolating a particular corner of the university or a place which can be isolated. It's just a place where you might walk. You might even walk in that place once, but then you might have a criminal, sort of what I call a criminal encounter, and then you think about that place in terms of safety. So I'm just basically saying that my research is not probably a different way to think about safety concerns. The scope is where I was conducting this research, and it was basically in Rhodes University, in Grahamstown, Makanda actually. Makanda is the municipality. The student population is 8,100, some thereabouts, but the majority of the students are female. And at the time that I was actually conducting the research, there was this talk of the RU reference list, which was a list of accused rapists in the university. And I believe maybe I was just right before that moment I was conducting this, which was sort of sparked, which was like, oh, I'm actually researching something which is really real and which is happening right now. So I felt proud of that. So there are people basically focusing on that. Ms. Daga, who is also a lecturer there, I believe, right now. Claude, who is also a lecturer there, I believe. In the scope 2, basically just focusing on what we have been reading with feminist research, is basically there is the need to highlight the feminist voice in our research, to talk about how women will experience places. There's a huge literature on feminist geography, which basically says that it comes from 1970. It has just been slowly getting modified, moderated, and people have been arguing of different realities that women face. And then basically, the theoretical framework, the way that I came about it was, basically I'm using phenomenology. That would be the main theory. But then in phenomenology, I'm focusing on theories which do not, basically I argue that they do not give gender, or they do not pay much attention to gender, but they think of people as basically experiences waiting to happen. People can think of them as basically dots, and then with these dots which go through life, there ends up being an experience which we as phenomenologists can gain the essences of and then translate to people, and you can better understand how people experience places. So the first theory I used was Edward Ralph's placelessness, which is basically saying that a place, in its most crude, would be a place is a geographic location which has the ground, buildings, whatever, without any other sort of attribution. But then when you go into insideness, is that the place which is just the ground, buildings, and whatever else which decorates it, it has meanings to people. Someone has a ground and frame which they call a home, and in that home they might have certain experiences which inspire which inspires how they think of home or the house. So that is basically Ralph. We have incidental, we have different sort of insidedness, which is incidental insidedness, basically by incident. I'm here in Joburg. I'm not really a Joburger. I'm just here for the conference, so I'm not really someone who's from here. So I'm just going here to do something and then leave. But then there's also experiential insidedness, which is you are Joburger and you know the places within Joburg which have a meaning, a meaningful meaning to you. So that those are the sort of different insidenesses. And then I used David Seaman, who basically says there's a place below. When we're in a place, we move within a place, we rest, and then we encounter people or big buildings, and then we have these sort of insideness experiences whereby buildings mean certain things and then people mean certain social interactions and such. The methods and procedures that I used were basically I had 10 female participants from various backgrounds. I just spoke to students who allowed me to speak to them and mentioned that I'm actually researching something. And then they came and agreed to basically be my participants. And then with those participants, they signed an informed consent form, and then we give them pseudonyms if they would like to have pseudonyms and such stuff. It basically obscures their identity so they are protected, and it's only myself who knows who they are, actually their true identities. We did mobile, I did mobile and photo voice interviewing. Mobile interview is basically walking with a person. Since this was a focus on habitual walking, I just said, let me walk with you to the places that you habitually go to. It's not a change to your usual schedule. So I felt that that would actually basically get you to be relaxed instead of me saying, let's go into a room, and then having a sort of, we just had a sort of conversation rather than an interview. I did this with a phenomenological eye, which is basically capturing the essence of experience, which is when someone communicates something to you, they make an argument out of different thoughts or ideas, minor ideas, which lead to the main thing. I'm not sure if you might get me, but you'll get me once you see what I did with the quotes, because we use a lot of quotes, especially when you do in vivo coding. And then, like I said, I did in vivo coding in terms of capturing the essence in the actual words of the participants, and then the themes and categories, how they've made their arguments basically just fall, and I see them and I'm happy, because I'm like, okay, now I'm seeing how this is actually happening. The findings, I'm starting with them in terms of just combining all of them at once, firstly, and then I'll go into the different sort of, you can say, layers of the argument. The experience is locale based, and people do actually focus on the victimization part, chance, and then people use their available resources, the females actually, human, the resources being human, physical, and reflective. First finding in terms of locale based, this basically means there is a location within the greater space, within a greater place, which is isolated as being the one which is problematic. And then, like from the quote, actually someone is saying she went to the botanical garden, and in the botanical garden she had a particular experience which, as she communicated with people around that garden, they said this place is not, it has its tendencies, that's what they argued, and that she should be careful. So these are some things that actually all the participants argue. It's never an experience which is devoid of a locale. There will be specific locations that the individual speaks about and elevates. The second part of the experience is that the experience itself is very much influenced by this thought of victimization, and it's basically everything to the individual, I might argue, in that the victimization is there in terms of maybe it's the wrong time of the day, it's the wrong part of the campus, and probably you in the wrong situation, you find yourself in the wrong situation, as communicated by Kopano here, one of the participants. And this is it was intriguing, because this research, I hadn't just focused specifically on females, but then it was just everyone in the university, and it was intriguing to see how the female would argue their potential of victimization as related to the male counterpart, in that that with females, it's just anything can happen. Like my title says, they feel that anything can happen, and in that anything which can happen, they may not have the necessary resources to get themselves out of it. Whereby with the male, in many cases, the argument was, well, they would bring in, I'm from this sort of place, so I know how to deal with this sort of experience, or I have this, I am sort of masculine, so I will not let another person do this to me. Whereas with a female, there is this sort of more, I would argue, general argument that, well, this person might take even more increasing liberties because of my gender, which it was quite evident in the communicated interviews. And the third part of the experience of, sorry? Oh, super. I will just hurry up. Third part of the experience is that the available resources are quite important because they allow you to negotiate the situation. Firstly, the human resources, in that it is people who will try and mug you, it is people who will try and question your safety within a space, so they give you that information that this space may not be the most safe space. But then also it's people who take you away from these situations of safety compromises. And like here in this sort of quotation, she mentions about things about taking the OPI bus, which is the transportation bus that roads allow students to take. So those people can actually take you out of your safety compromise situation, and then you use that as a resource to better manage your safety. Other sort of safety available resources to negotiate safety are the physical resources. Like at roads, we don't have a wall around I saw that here you have to sign in at the gate, but at roads we don't have such. And the participants basically argued this, that at roads anyone can enter at any point and they can do as they like. But then at the same time, with roads, as a community engagement sort of in university, we try and have the surrounding community engage with us a lot more, and the doors are always open, basically. So there is that, so we have to navigate that reality. But then, like I said, it affects some females' safety concerns. And then there's also the available resources are the reflexive resources. People think about their safety in an internally comparative situation. They might, at roads, you think of how safe was I a year ago as compared to how safe I am right now. And it's basically just that comparison which you take with you as you habitually walk, and this affects your habitual walking, because now you think, well, I might not be so safe if I go here, I might not be so safe if I stay here. So you basically just wandering to those places that you might consider to be safe spaces, physical spaces. Then there's also the external comparison, in that, like I said, in Grahamstown, it's open, the university is open, there's no gates such as here at VETS. So people would think of such instances and then say, well, since it's open, let me act in a particular way rather than this other way that might lead to me being compromised. Basically, in conclusion, is females at Rhodes University experience safety as an engaging sort of question on the quality of safety. As you habitually walk in, at whatever time, there is this question that comes up to you and says, are you safe? And then you think about that question, and then you decide accordingly, and either take yourself to a safe environment, or you proceed and hope that this anything which can happen in terms of criminal encounter may not happen to you at that moment. And then this sort of environment thought leads to the environment being a space within, having spaces within space. So there's a space which is safe, there's a space that's not safe, and you have no way of actually ever determining that. You have no way of ever determining that which space would be which space at any other moment, because like the participants have argued, anything can happen, and it might happen at a space that you're not expecting it to happen. So you have to be wary of that. I think that I've argued the point, the negotiation of previous, and these thoughts on safety are not actually restricted by your own experience. Also the experiences of others, the experiences that you've heard other females talking about, in terms of, someone even asked me, did you know that there was a female who was raped here at this particular race? And I heard about that, but she would be like, I heard there was some, there's this particular story which, when I heard, there was a man who came into a residence and shot and killed his ex, I believe. So you have such thoughts that you have to negotiate as a female within the walls of the university, and all of these engaging with criminal encounter, then the space being a space within, being spaces within space, and then the quality not being fixed. All of these questions go into the female experience of growth as a habitually walked environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Siyathokoza. Last, but let's see if we can proceed. All right, the next we're going to listen to Saneliso Thambo.
My name is Saneliso Thambo. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Free State. So this is a co-authored paper, and it's almost fully developed. So I guess it's still open to contributions. And I guess I'll allow the co-author to take some of the questions. The paper explores the policing, regulation, and shaming of non-conforming femininities in Matlwa's controversially titled novel, Pure Pain. The title, Pure Pain, attempts to recenter feminine ontologies that have been driven to the periphery of society's respectable discourses. Most African societies deny the subject of menstruation or period pain legitimacy in public discourses on the basis that it belongs to private and shameful feminine spaces. So by invoking these secretive and taboo subjects, Matlwa reaffirms the subjectivity of women and their forgotten senses of being. The naturalization and normalization of patriarchal notions of being feminine transformed socially constructed myths into God-ordained realities. This article then critically interrogates how patriarchal constructions of femininity and womanhood function as instruments of social control and masculine domination. We seek to understand or rather we understand the term masculinity as a hegemonic and dominant social construct, right? And understanding patriarchy as a system, it helps us to reject the notion of biological determinism, which says that women and men are naturally different because of their biological bodies, and therefore they are supposed to be assigned different roles. So, or the notion that every individual man is always in a dominant position and every woman in a subordinate one. So Kopano Matlwa's text is set in post-apartheid South Africa, which in recent years has witnessed a resurgence of violent and toxic masculinities. Since the apartheid era and even beyond, most South African societies have always conflated masculinity with violence, and men that engage in violence or have the capacity to engage in it are often given a form of respect amongst their peers and in society. While society constructs masculinity along the lines of strength, dominance, and violence, femininity is constructed based on weakness, subjugation to male authority. And while femininity constitutes a different gender and way of being, patriarchy often represents it as a lack or an absence of masculinity, as if to suggest that women are failed men or inadequate beings. So we adopt Foucault's the concept of discipline as a powerful tool that society develops to coerce and correct the behavior of unconforming bodies. This understanding by Foucault, it stems from the Phenomenological, a tall tower in the middle of prisons used to monitor and regulate the behavior of prisoners. So we consider the male gaze as a function of this. It functions as a new version of the Phenomenological that monitors the female body and forces it to act in ways that satisfy patriarchy. This theorization is relevant to our reading of Matlwa's text because it enables us to interrogate the way patriarchy seeks to domesticate female bodies and impose a rigid femininity. So in period Pay, Matlwa depicts female bodies as targets of corrective disciplinary power and sites where men perform idealized masculinities. In the text, men use violence to discipline and punish women who fail or refuse to adhere to and conform to societal expectations. And in theorizing what she calls volatile bodies, Gross characterizes the body as that materiality, almost a medium on which power operates and through which it functions. The female body thus embodies that side where dominant masculinities perform power. And one of the characters who's the protagonist in that novel called Masechaba, whose name literally means the one who embodies society, displays traits that society regards as outside of the normative and thus warranting corrective measures. Masechaba disrupts conventional notions of femininity. She is not compassionate, she's not caring, she's not loving as society expects of women. And her story shows that gender is a social construct and not all women fit into gender categories that already exist in society. So when Masechaba is musing on her past, like on her childhood, she says, I quote, "When Papa used to live with us, he would often say, 'Why do you talk so much? You are overconfident for a young lady. Be humble, be quiet, rest a little.'" This quotation does not only highlight patriarchy's tendency to police and regulate female bodies, but also the view that femininity should constitute itself as the opposite of masculinity. Papa symbolizes the patriarchal order that seeks to subordinate and keep women in a state of perpetual domesticity. Society seeks to appropriate and reconfigure the female body so that it can conform to what Batsky calls the disciplinary regime of femininity. Papa is an agent of this regime and he seeks to relegate Masechava's spirited and outspoken disposition to the domestic sphere and reconstitute her as a culturally accepted woman. And as a teenager, Masechava battles with a heavy menstrual flow that leaves her with a deep sense of shame and a desire to remove her womb and stop the abnormal cycle. Most societies often conflate the womb with womanhood, and hence Masechava's desire to remove the womb is metaphorically a refusal to embrace society's view of womanhood as the ability to reproduce. Masechava's experience shows that women experience femininity in different ways, and there is no one way of being a woman. The womb, often seen as a sacred source of life, is a source of discomfort and pain for Masechava. She, in one of her musings, she says, years since I've wanted to stick my fist all the way up in my vagina and yank the demon out, meaning the womb. And so her wish to do this is unfeminine because as a woman, she must cherish reproduction and childbearing. So her unwomanly wish is met with resistance from her mother, who strongly believes that the femininity of a woman is equivalent to her ability to procreate. And her mother, in that sense, becomes a tool that perpetuates patriarchal oppression by policing her daughter's sexuality. A woman does not own her body. She is a reproductive machine that ensures the survival of the race. As a result, Masechava's aspiration for a life without a womb is not only unfeminine, but also selfish and evil. Her reproductive system does not only belong to her, but also to her mother, who is looking forward to great children, and society that expects her to reproduce and preserve the human race. The implication here is that Masechava's happiness and personal freedom are secondary to the needs of society, and as a woman, she must forgo her own interests and prioritize the public good. Her mother believes that the ability to reproduce is a joyful experience, and hence her daughter's talk about removing the womb is an expression of some kind of mental disorder. So the point that Matlwa seeks to make at this point is that reproduction is not pleasurable to every woman, right? Therefore, reproduction does not signify woman. In fact, Masechava does not understand why her mother thinks that women should care about reproducing. She states at one point that, I quote, "What did I care for bringing life into the world when I couldn't have a life of my own? When I lived hostage to a beast in my pelvis that could split its head at any moment of its choosing, and angrily spill its contents onto the floor at any second of its liking without provocation. What life did I have? Did Ma not care about that?" So she must enjoy this beast in her pelvis because perseverance is considered a noble quality in women. And what is particularly worrisome about her situation is that her mother, a fellow woman, is the one who enforces her misery. She's concerned more about perpetuating the patriarchal order than preserving her daughter's life. Masechava contests the patriarchalization of reproduction by refusing to function as an incubator. Her hostile womb resists the objectification of women and the instrumentalization of reproduction. She particularly views reproduction as an end in itself, and women as the means to meet this. So, her desire to remove her womb threatens that order, right? She does not own either her body or the bodies of her progeny. She is the property of patriarchy, and so is her progeny. This echoes Rothman's assertion that patriarchy is rooted in the begets, the book of Genesis, where each man from Adam begets a son in his likeness after his image. And he argues that in the patriarchal kinship system, children are born to men out of women, and women in this system bear the children of men. So women's bodies are thus a means to an end. Right? Because of time, I think there is a lot of exciting things that I wanted to tell you about the paper, but Masacheva does not celebrate menstruation because it signifies the beginning of an out-of-control status. Menstruation imposes itself on the lives of women and restricts their freedom. Thus, far from being an elevated status which bestows upon women the sacred responsibility of giving life, womanhood signals the end of freedom for all menstruating women. Menstruation is a mess and is uncontrollable and occurs whenever it occurs. This is Masachaba's words, right? Through menstruation, women's bodies become sites of shame that must be hidden away from respectable society. And on this note, Christiana argues that menstrual blood stands for the danger issuing from within the identity. It threatens the relationship between the sexes within a social aggregate. And through internalization, the identity of each sex is the face of sexual difference. So through this formulation, we argue that menstruation designates a separate and abject identity to women. Through menstruation, a woman ceases to be a mere human being, but a being with orifices that leak uncontrollably. Menstruation thus becomes not only a marker of difference between the sexes, but also of inferiority. It becomes a symbol of danger that has to be contained and kept in check as it threatens the relationship between the sexes. So Masachaba is compelled to envision her menstrual blood as a beast that seeks to devour and destroy her. For Masachaba, the womb is not a blessing but a curse because it denies her to live life on her own terms. Her heavy menstrual flow influences her decision to become a medical doctor, although she does not enjoy the profession, because her ultimate goal is to learn how to get rid of the womb, which has literally taken over her life. Her character, like her menstrual flow, leaks out of the culturally sanctioned ideal woman. She is expected to be kind, compassionate, caring, to take care of the sick and bring up children. And ultimately she does become a doctor. But although she is a doctor and her profession requires her to sympathize with the sick, she hates taking care of the sick and does not have any compassion for them. Society often assumes that women enjoy care work and those who do not enjoy it are stigmatized as unfeminine. Her experience shows that not every woman enjoys taking care of other people. She's not empathetic as expected by society, but feels the opposite. She does not wish recovery, but death for her suffering patients. The implication is that attributes such as compassion, love, care, they are not necessarily feminine. Her behavior debunks the myth that doctors care about the welfare of their patient. It is impossible to be a doctor it is possible to be a doctor and a woman and not feel any sense of compassion for one's patients. I think I will just rush to the conclusion because I feel I have highlighted, I've made the point that I wanted to make. So, in conclusion, this paper has argued that Kopano's text delineates the various ways in which patriarchy seeks to control and discipline non-conforming female bodies. Masechaba becomes a target of sexual violence because she refuses to conform to what patriarchy considers a normal woman, because ultimately she gets raped because of her being a female that does not conform. Later in the text, she becomes an activist for xenophobia, and the men in the text do not like that. So ultimately, she gets raped because of that. She experiences this sexual violence because she refuses to conform to what patriarchy considers this normal woman. She wants to remove this womb, which according to patriarchy is the essence of womanhood. And we also argue that although Masechaba attempts to redefine womanhood outside the parameters set by patriarchy, she eventually loses the battle because she neglects sisterly alliances with fellow women who are also victims of the patriarchal system. I thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Thembakazi Matroshe. I am an independent art curator and I will be presenting today my honors work from my curatorship course last year at the University of Cape Town. And as you can see, the exhibition was titled Unraveled, a reimagination of the Fallist archive. I presented an extended catalogue which was my thesis, and I also had an exhibition in collaboration with artists Yonela Makombe and Ranjima. I'll just start by reading the abstracts, then I'll get through the investigation and the research that went behind the preparation for the exhibition. In 2015 to 2017, students in South Africa fought to decolonize education across all tertiary institutions through Fallism, a school of thought concerned with decoloniality and Afrocentricity. Rose Must Fall 2015 and Fees Must Fall 2015 to 2017 were student-led movements that drew awareness and challenged white supremacy and institutional racism in South African universities. Fallism aimed to deconstruct and disrupt colonial legacies. The ideology was based on the early writings of Frantz Fanon and Steve Biko. This paper presents evidence that RMF's pillars of Pan-Africanism, Black consciousness, and Black radical feminism collapsed without intersectionality. A collapse resulting in the erasure of Black female, trans, and gender non-conforming individuals in the movement. Through a Black feminist and intersectional and decolonial lens, I grapple with the erasure, patriarchy, and transmisogyny within RMF and FMF. I juxtapose mainstream media narratives against the social media archive curated by Fallists. The Duk became an aesthetic marker for female, trans, and gender non-binary individuals during RMF and FMF. I believe that the Duk functioned as a metonym for the subversion of gendered presentation. The material culture of the Duk is investigated with historical reference to the Dutch wax print and the Xhosa tradition of headwrap. I consider the Duk in a curatorial and artistic intervention to give visibilities to those rendered invisible. work is influenced by the trans collective's intervention during the Echoing Voices from Within exhibition. I center the body as an archive, creating new epistemologies and challenging archives that erase alternative bodies. The final section details my collaborations as well as how I visually articulated these ideas. So as I said, this was an artistic intervention and an object study. So the object I decided to look at was the duk. This is an image of me during the day when Winnie Matroshe passed away and we were all dressed in black wearing duks. So I started off by researching the background of the Dutch wax or Hollandaise fabric, and basically I saw that as much as we consider Dutch wax as an African aesthetic, it has a lot of roots in colonialism, which the fabric was essentially created in Indonesia, which was appropriated by the Dutch, and then began being disseminated within West Africa and other parts of Africa, including South Africa as well. One of the companies I looked at was Blisco, which is a multi-international company that basically specializes in these fabrics, and they are designed in the Netherlands. A lot of people will be familiar with them, but right now the Blisco fabrics are extremely expensive and are considered as a visualization of the African aesthetic or the Afropolitan aesthetic. So one of the artists that I looked at in my paper was Yinka Shonobare, because he's one of the top artists in the continent, coming from Nigeria, and a lot of his sculptural work deal with this fabric and its complexities. So this is a work titled Adam and Eve, and the work displays figures that we would see as Adam and Eve, and their sculptural wear is in the African print, or rather the Dutch Hollandaise fabric. Because I'm a Xhosa individual, I also decided to tap into my own culture because I've always been familiarized with black African Xhosa women head wrapping, and a lot of them will use the fabric of umpango, which is 100% cotton. It's very heavy, which is similar to denim, and they typically wear their head wraps in a very towering or multi-layered style. They can come in varying colors and shades, such as the lady over there in the green. And then I decided to link this idea of the duk, because the entire curatorial course was to search for an object that represented an issue or something that you wanted to represent. So I sought out the duk, and I saw it as a visual marker, because a lot of people wore the duk during the Roads Must Fall and Feet Must Fall protests. So I decided that I would play around with the idea of the duk not only being worn by people who are categorized as female, but also how the duk became a signifier for individuals who were outside of those binaries of female versus male. So I just did an overview of what Roads Must Fall and Feet Must Fall, and I'm sure all of us are familiar with that. And then I started to see the internal conflicts within Roads Must Fall and Feet Must Fall. The internal and external conflicts, rather. So for instance, this was a very famous cover that came out of Destiny magazine, where Unompendulo Kacho was wearing a duk with the ANC emblem and colors, and it created a lot of conversation and controversy on social media. So my understanding is that this one object can symbolize a multitude of things, and it has a lot of politics embedded within it. And part of the ideas behind Fees Must Fall was that there was a non-partisan stance. So when one of the leaders of Fees Must Fall was pictured on a glamorous glossy magazine wearing this duk and very extreme contrasted lighting, I began to almost look at the image from a visual perspective and break it down in comparison with all the other individuals who were part of Fees Must Fall, who were also wearing duks, but might not necessarily have been cis-het, might not necessarily have been considered beautiful, might not necessarily have been pictured in a glamorous magazine, but were also part of this Fees Must Fall and Roads Must Fall archive. So I began digging in the alternative archive that was found on social media. So this was the whole point of my investigation, trying to dissect mainstream media in comparison with the archive that was created by the people on the ground on Facebook and Twitter and all sorts of social media. One of the quotes that I really enjoyed was a banner that was held at one of the Rhodes Must Fall protests, and it stated, "Dear history, this revolution has women, gays, queers and trans. Remember that, hashtag Rhodes Must Fall." And the back of the placard stated, "We are not done yet." So this brings me into the second part of my investigation, where exactly a year after Tumani Matlwa threw feces on the Rhodes Must Fall statue, UCT held an exhibition to almost celebrate Rhodes Must Fall, which was thought of as very contradictory and controversial by other individuals. So the Trans Collective had an artistic intervention during this exhibition, where the individuals painted themselves in red. Most of them were naked and they had red lipstick, and basically they just smeared red paint across the walls, across the images. Some of the images were written erasure. I remember an image of Tumani Matlwa was written rapist. So that artistic intervention was seen as a disruption by other people, but a lot of us saw that it exposed a lot of inconsistencies in the movement. So this was my thesis statement, basically, that Rhodes Must Fall's pillars of Pan-Africanism, Black consciousness, and Black radical feminism collapsed without intersectionality. A collapse resulting in the erasure of Black female, trans, and gender non-conforming individuals in the movement. Through Black radical feminist, intersectional, and decolonial thought, I grapple with the erasure, patriarchy, and trans misogyny within RMF and FMF. I juxtapose mainstream media narratives against the social media archive curated by Fallist. So my curatorial investigation, as I said, looked at the Dok, and I obviously investigated the material culture of the Dok as stemming from the Dutch wax print as well as its Indonesian origins. So some of you will see at the point of order, I believe that's where the exhibition is. These are some of the exhibition prints that I presented. My entire exhibition was a sculptural installation. So as you'll see, these Doks that have been worn by the individuals here were actual sculptures. So we presented the sculptures and we also presented the images. And then I also had a wall of black and white portraits of individuals that were seen as nameless and faceless in the movement. That whole exhibition has been bought by UCT as part of a permanent collection, but these are exhibition copies. So basically I termed this as which means flowers of the revolution, which is also another critique on the ANC Kondowesizwe movement, where Thambo called the female constituents of Kondowesizwe as flowers of the revolution. So Fees Must Fall and Rhodes Must Fall patriarchs appropriated this term and called the femme individuals as flowers of the revolution. And a lot of people felt that this was almost condescending and not empowering. So we played on that idea of the flower, and we began researching flowers that are poisonous or deadly once ingested or touched by human beings. So all of these sculptures resemble certain poisonous flowers, but then the people in the images represent trans, queer, black, non-binary individuals. So it's almost a juxtaposition of a term that was used to belittle them, and then the faces of people who have almost been marginalized, but I'm centering them because the prints were quite large. So I centered them in the exhibition to make everything quite prominent. So yeah, this is just the blurb for the prints. I'm sure you guys will see it in the exhibition space. And then in conclusion, RMF and FMF's problematic representation of the movement as a victorious hypermasculine expression of black power within the institution. Through reference to contentious issues within the movement and the way various bodies have been silenced, I have attempted to create a more diverse space for engagement around this topic. I have concluded with this section as I did with the trans collective's disruption, iterment and artistic intervention of the RMF exhibition as an example of how students had the agency to speak out against the patriarchal narratives, even if it required speaking against the transformative movements on campus. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thembakazi. We have time for one round of questions for our speaker. So please can we ask them? Yes, Joy?
Thank you very much. Mine is not a question, it's a contribution to Thembakazi, the last speaker. Thank you for that presentation of the Dutch wax. I'm in gender studies, and I just want to explain a bit of what the Dutch wax represents for those of us from West Africa and from the Igbo culture. The Dutch wax is an important fabric in the life of an Igbo woman. The number of Dutch wax places the woman in a particular social class. Your inability to get the Dutch wax means that you are poor. And the ability to get so much Dutch wax means you are at a particular social class. Now the Dutch wax has names. The kind of Dutch wax that you have is associated with names. Names like what? Heavy rainfall. So when you wear a Dutch wax, it has a name like heavy rainfall. It means I am wealthy. There's another Dutch wax that is called the jumping horse. It means I am high. There's another Dutch wax called ruler. You cannot cross me. And these are associated with the African woman. Now, in marriage, if your spouse is not able to bring certain number of Dutch wax, it means you have brought in a man that is incapable of caring for you. So that's the importance of the Dutch wax in the life of an African woman, especially in Igbo culture. Now, when you are married, it is expected that when you are happy, your hairstyle, there's one they call satellite. So when you dress as an Igbo woman, you tie the duke in such a way that it's hanging. It means I'm high. And it's associated with the people they call Umwada in Igbo culture. I was only trying to add, because I liked what you did, on the importance of the Dutch wax in the life of an African woman in the Igbo cultural context. Thank you. I hope I made sense.
Thank you, Joy. For that contribution. Questions? Yes, thanks.
So mine is really a point of clarity. So time comes up a couple of times in your 5 findings. So time is in the day or time is in the year, respectively. So I'm curious in terms of how you thought through, right, in terms of your data and what they organize across. That's one. Number 2, you interview 10 females. I'm not sure how many male voices you include there. And you offer a gendered reading in terms of what becomes the preoccupation of violence in terms of the women's subjective experience. Yet you don't contextualize that in terms of either the time, whether there were more reported rapes abroad, or whether generally was another reverse income moment in South Africa. So I'm just curious in terms of the subjective versus the contextual. I've been part of 3 universities in South Africa, and there are parts in all those universities where you do not walk. There are rape corridors, we know this. So it's not something also at the same time it's not unique to roles. Another just last thing I'm curious about. You presented it as if it's a demand that there should be gains. As if it's how do I phrase this? What possibilities, what lies on the other side of this violence and thinking through around safety, other than the walls? The university that is not walled. Yeah? I'm not sure if I made sense to it. And then last speaker, Ms. Thembakazi. I'd like to apologize in advance. I'll try and phrase this.
Okay.
So, in the LGBTI community and gender issues, obviously issues of recognition and racism they matter. But if we have to look at this particular moment of resistance, what did the forceful, or rather the assertion of transversibility achieve as a political project, other than saying we too are part of it, which matters. But I'm curious in terms of of your own reading? What did that do? The second point is, you say Fees Must Fall leaned on 3 ideological political orientations, and you say the intersectionality did not hold it through. But that's the nature of movements. They die, they dwindle out. What is it specifically about this particular student movement that made it limited, other than saying hyper-masculinity, right? So, for example, if you have to look at Verts, what happened in the Amigdale, where the particular group of women who were trying to assert themselves in terms of their presence went off and got the shabots. Some people might see that as radical, some people might see that as violence, some people might see that as countering violence. In any case, it's a moment of asserting presence through violence. But what did that do also in terms of thinking through of that moment, if you like, around movement building in diversity? I hope I made sense.
Yeah, with the trans visibility one, I think my curatorial project, because I don't identify as a trans individual, I collaborated with trans people, and through the paper I made use of a lot of quotations so as not to take up space but rather create space. So that's always a disclaimer that I put out there before I begin to utter anything. So I believe that within an artistic canon and within the archive that UCT was attempting to create with the Echoes from Within exhibition, I believe that that stance of resistance from the trans collective was extremely important in disrupting the almost linear narrative that UCT was trying to create. Secondly, as I said, the exhibition that I produced was also acquired by UCT and is now in their permanent collection. So these cross-references between work of any kind of cultural production are important in the archive, because you can see that it's no longer linear, like people are already arguing from within the academy. So that was my genuine contribution to the archive, so that the narrative wouldn't be regarded as linear when people come into the university and they try to understand what the movement was about. We had to create these obstructions and make it more difficult to read. So I could agree that the only thing that the artistic intervention done by the trans collective did was to render more visibility, but I wouldn't say that was a fail. I wouldn't say that was a bad thing. I would say it's an extremely good thing to have more visibility on an issue when people feel extremely marginalized by their own movement. The second one was the intersectionality. So regarding student movements in general, I think they tend to have a very short-term lifespan because of the university structure. So it's unfair to say that because there was no intersectionality or lack thereof, the entire movement collapsed. I think there are lots of other factors that contribute to student movements failing to have a certain longevity. From my personal curatorial project, I just saw intersectionality as one of the key things that did not allow RMF and FMF to continue. I think Fees Must Fall had a more nuanced understanding of what intersectionality had, but because they were largely influenced by RMF and those tenets of Pan-Africanism, Black consciousness, and Black radical feminism were there from the start, it was almost like intersectionality wasn't a framework to begin with. It was almost always brought in towards the end when I proposed that intersectionality was a wholesome framework that included all of these other kind of lenses. And yeah, I hope that answers the questions.
Siyathokoza, and I'll come back to you for Afems. Do you want to ask him? Siyathokoza.
Well, unfortunately, I also want to ask that. I don't know whether it's a question or a reflection. I'm trying to get to your name, Thembakazi. I was quite fascinated that you referenced Gichanda, who actually has had whole collections of his work based on this print that is produced in Holland, and we have adopted as our own authentic, African print. Because Rose Must Fall was essentially also a decolonial movement, have you in your work also, and in referencing Gichanda, highlighted the complexities that are involved in us using artifacts that were brought as part of the colonial trade relations and which actually destroyed our indigenous fabric making enterprises as in the articulation of an authentic African identity. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
That irony that you also questioned, you expand on it in your work.
I don't think the project did enough because the catalog was only 10,000 words and the exhibition was only on for a week. So I think, I wouldn't say it was a shallow investigation, but I think there could have been more nuances that could have been brought out. For instance, we only worked with a certain kind of fabric in the images, and the brand was only Visco. I didn't get to dig into the other types of African wax print fabrics. I didn't start to research. I think Yinka Shonibare was the only artist that I started to look at, but I think there are quite a lot of artists that deal with other textiles that I've recently discovered, artists that deal with blankets, artists that deal with many textiles. So I think the project could have, or can still look into the multitude of fabrics and textiles that exist, and by doing that it can also tease out more of the complexities between our history, the African history, and particularly my South African context with regards, because we also use the Dutch wax fabric as well. So with regards to that and how that cross-pollination occurred or still occurs.
Yes, thank you for your questions. Start with the wall situation. I think it's a complicated situation because, and there is no consensus on the issue actually, because like I mentioned in the presentation, there are those who want to war, and there are those who find no reason to have a war. So, basically, the complicating factor there, I believe, might be the fact that the university would like to be a certain kind of university. It would like to be an open door sort of university. And I believe even right now they've sent emails to people, I think, asking them what they could do to university space to make it more, I'm not sure if it's safe or more acceptable, or people could find things they identify better. So the issue with the war actually is there is another side of that. There are people who want that, who don't want it. It's just a here and there situation. So I'm not sure how that might be sorted out. But I think that's basically the situation with the war. In terms of the time that I was, the contextualizing part of the time, I think. As I mentioned in the presentation, sometimes things happen, people reflect on them because they're happening right now, but then sometimes they reflect on them because they have heard people talk about them or they have happened in the past. Like in terms of contextualizing, I think I did my research, it was in late 2016 to 2017. I don't think there was a reverse income sort of situation happening. And to me, it was actually quite, it was surprising the way that people were reflecting about safety, because I had conducted my MA on something probably similar, but people had not brought up safety that much. But then at that moment, safety came up, and I was like, why is it coming up? But then only a couple of months after I was finished, did I see that there was this RU reference list happening. So there was perhaps something happening in the university space, but then because I'm not probably on social media, I had not seen this. But then it just happened. The posters near the library just came up and people were being named and shamed. But I don't believe there was some huge media spectacle about anything which had happened. It was just, safety is something that you think about. Doesn't have to be, doesn't have to be a catalyst elsewhere or within the space. It's It's just something that you, as someone who walks in the place, like you mentioned, people feel unsafe in certain spaces and they feel safe in others. So it was just that sort of situation. I don't believe there was a major sort of catalyst. But then afterwards, I saw why people were mentioning safety that much, was because they were having these conversations back when they were supposed to be for such interest groups that they ended up going their way in the situation. The other question of time, I believe, you mentioned the juxtaposition between male and female. Am I getting that right?
No, I was just trying to understand your own reading, your own gender reading in terms of the articulation of safety, right? So in terms of the sample, you have 10 females, but the presentation mentions males, right?
Okay,
So it becomes gendered in the sense of rape, GBV, being assaulted, being incident like this. So in terms of males, then what becomes the other side of safety or violence in those anxieties?
As you can see, Shani is just on my case. Can you two talk about this together? Thank you so much. I have a question.